everyone could please make their way to their seats. We are about to start the final panel. Thank you.
This is our final session and concluding session of this wonderful forum. We don't know how time flies, basically. I'm just talking to Raghida. It's been 2 days we are here in Sulaimani, and it has been a wonderful forum. For me personally, this is local. I've attended so many international forums all over the world, but really this has a different taste and a different meaning. And this is the third forum, and I have seen that it has progressed, it has grown. And believe me, Barham, I take this forum as a parameter for Iraqi politics, KRG, Baghdad relations, and with each year we have new topic, new title. This year it has been ISIS, or somebody described it as crisis. Or the title of this year forum has been the Fertile Crescent in Turmoil. I would have some thoughts about all this, but what I want to do is really, we don't have a topic for this panel. So let's make it personal. We'll ask you directly some question. I'll not introduce you because you have the names, but we have the first panelist is Raghida Dargham. She is a very serious writer in Al Hayat newspaper. She has been working from New York for many years and covered all the crises of the world. And she is now the president of the newly established Beirut Institute, which will be launched soon. Next panelist, we have Joseph Bahoud, Ahlan wa Sahlan, a fellow Carnegie Endowment. And then we have the third panelist, Neil Quilliam, acting head of Middle East for Chatham House. Most welcome. Azam Alwash, whom you all know, he has worked very hard on this forum, so thank you for everything. Apart from your keen interest in water, environment, and looking forward to hearing from you. And Randa. Randa, I will have some discussions with you later on, but let's start with Raghida. This is your first time in Iraq. This is your first time in Kurdistan.
That's right.
You have covered Iraq war, you've covered Kurdish stories for many years. What is your impression?
Well, first of all, that you are very well organized, and Barham Saleh is a great surprise for me, because not because he does things right, always, from my point of view, but also because this conference, as you correctly said, has been a very solid introduction to what's going on here in Iraq, from the points of views, the very different points of views. And being for the first time in Iraq, I am really sad to say that my conclusion is that things are not well in Iraq, having listened to a lot of people. And I am very sad to hear that, because I thought that there was a new beginning with a new government. I thought there was a new mindset. Unfortunately, listening to many people, many officials here.
But this is Iraq also.
That's right, but the Iraq that you are dreaming of is not the one that I was hoping to hear about. For example, I tell you, I find it rather disheartening that people in full confidence say, this is we are in the front lines for fighting this war against Daesh and for humanity, for international peace, and we hold it. There has been already a war when Iraq had been in the front line, so that war against terrorism, against Al-Qaeda could be fought in your country, on your soil, and not in American cities,
But
as pronounced by President
since
Bush.
1990, Iraq has been in the forefront of many wars in the region, so this is not new.
Yes,
And you've covered them all.
true. Does not justify being in denial, nor does it justify premature celebration of things that are happening geopolitically. In denial, I say, because I feel that unless you address the need to be inclusive, really inclusive in your discussions, I feel that we are not here to rehash what happened, but to face a new challenge and to build a new era. And unless you decide, unless one party says to the other, I need you in this fight clearly as a partner all the way, it's not going to be a win-win war in this war against Daesh. And so, if you permit me, I just want to say that here's what I saw missing in this debate. I thought a year ago that there was a new page in the relationship between Iraq and its neighbors in the Arab world, particularly Saudi Arabia. I didn't see any sense of where this was going to, or if there's any appreciation of it anymore. And I'm certainly going to tell you that the absence of the Arabs and the disarray in dealing with Iran is not excusable. But on the other hand, it is not about their failures that should really be the subject of conversation. It's about the needs for a healthy Iraq. A healthy Iraq cannot live only off a healthy relationship with Iran. A very important component, that it has to be a good relationship with Iran, but it cannot live within a imbalance, if you will, with the Arab
we have those discussions with you before. The reasons the Iranians are here, the Arab are not here in Iraq.
That's true. I just said
We have said that all along.
But
and
it's,
the general can testify to that.
but it's not in your interest.
No, I know.
It's not in your interest to go on assuming and presuming that your future will be okay within good relations with Iran only. You know that. You know this is not doable.
Nobody
you
is
know
saying that.
That's exactly what I am saying. That's what I saw missing, is tackling that important aspect of making sure to preserve or to create, if you will, a new relationship, the dynamics that began at the beginning of the new government between Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Even as I said, with their own failures, it is for your own success that you need to take care of that. One last thing about the dynamics, and that again I saw rather missing here in several discussions. I feel that there has not been enough reflection on what does it mean to have a new understanding between the United States and Iran. I think there is premature celebration by some here in Iran, thinking that's it, we won. That is dangerous. The jury is still out. We don't really know what's in that agreement if it takes place. There will be a very serious American divide. There will be a very serious problem within the United States because of this agreement. If the mood that is now we're witnessing that it is telling. And secondly, I think that the euphoria by some might lead to mistakes on the regional level. So I think it's very important.
I can discuss this topic for hours with you, okay?
I know you can,
but I'll leave it here.
Yeah,
I'll leave it here. I hope in the future there would be close cooperation between the Beirut Institute and Sulaimani Forum.
for that, I say yes, absolutely.
Joseph, let's start with you. Just to follow up on our discussions with Rabia. In Iraq, despite all our differences or inconsistencies, but believe me, we are fortunate that we have the framework to resolve our problem. That is the Constitution, even it's not perfect, okay? But you've seen all the key Iraqi leaders in the last couple of days. They all expressed their views openly, transparently, these are decision makers. They are representative of constituencies. And every time people think that this country is going down the drain to crash, we pick up ourselves and then overcome the difficulties. I want to hear your reflection, your impression that this process is there. I mean, no political process is without difficulties. But really, ISIS has united all the communities in many ways. But there are still many, many challenges ahead. We hear different perspectives, international, Iraqi, Kurdish, that there are challenges, but there are opportunities. I want to hear from you, from Carnegie, this very famous institute, your reflection of this forum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Minister. In fact, I will talk more on my behalf than on Carnegie's behalf. It's an institution where, in fact, we are very free to say whatever we like, every one of us. But first of all, I would like also to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Saleh for this invitation. And since you asked us all to reflect upon our personal impressions, it's also my first visit to Iraq, so to Kurdistan. And I must say I'm quite impressed with what I've seen, with the level of debates with this university and the way things are done. And I would say, and it has to do with your question about how I assess the situation. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's German Chancellor Willy Brandt that said once, when I arrived in a new country, one way to assess the state of things is to visit prisons and universities. Okay, I'll leave prisons aside, we haven't fortunately visited them, but if we have to judge by Sulaimani University, I think that the future of this region, at least, the KRG region and maybe Iraq, is not as bleak as the future of the rest of the region. This is where probably the judgment is more balanced. Coming back to your question, I think it's a concluding panel. Everything has almost been said. It's very difficult to say something new. I will try to give you my impression of what are the takeaways that I can in fact find after two days of debate, and maybe read them in my own lenses and with my own reading. You asked me a question which is in fact very dear to me, about the way with which Iraqis both accommodate their differences and their sometimes deep divisions, and also the ability with which they rebound, and they are in fact more or less resilient after crisis. In these two respects, I'm sorry to personalize things, but you invited us to be personal. You know that I come from Lebanese origin. So I think that these two questions are also very dear to us, Lebanese, and I think that on these two levels we share a lot of things. Okay, we maybe preceded you, Lebanese, we preceded you in Iraq, Iraqis in our, let's say, habit of quarreling and dividing and etc., and also of patching up countries after wars and etc. And I think there are a lot of parallels between our two countries. However, I would like to say two or three things that are a little bit less encouraging. And these are reflections upon what I've heard here these 2 days. The first question has to do with this incredible, monstrous specter that we are all talking about, ISIS. Okay, we have convened here under one headline, which is the Fertile Crescent in Turmoil. However, we in fact mainly talked about ISIS, and I think there's a correlation between the two. My take on this issue of ISIS, and several people alluded to it, but I think now it's time to reach a consensus on that. We are talking, or we are running the risk of talking more about ISIS as the symptom of something, more than talking about the something itself. My feeling is that ISIS is the result or the convergence, let's say the resultant of several things that are in fact unsolved for more than decades in the Arab world, in this region of the world. First of all, the convergence between too much involvement from the Western powers, aka 2003 in Iraq, and too little involvement, aka 2011, 2012, 2014 in Syria, and etc. I think that ISIS is the result of these two dynamics. Too much from one side and too little from another side. ISIS is also the result of accumulated, unsolved problems of governance in the region since the 50s. And we're talking about them as if we are discovering them now. They were at the root of the Arab Spring or the Arab Revolution. We have forgot them. Now we are turning around towards them, but because of ISIS, but we are treating the symptom and not treating the root cause. We can go on this. The second big takeaway, which leads me back to your question, has to do with this, I think, the crucial question for the decades to come in this region of the world. How to accommodate plurality with unity. How to live together with the fact of retaining our identities, our differences, and etc. Yesterday, a very short sequence was utmostly interesting, for me at least, both as a political scientist, analyst, and as a Lebanese. This debate about the oil revenue and the oil issue between Baghdad and Erbil and etc. I think more than only identity, I mean accommodation, how to live together in one political space, call it as you wish, a state, a nation, etc., different and together, is not only a question of identity, but it's also a question of technicality. I mean, we have to learn in this region of the world to address this question of diversity, not only from an ideological point of view, but also from a mechanical point of view, from a constitutional point of view. And on that level, at least also, I think that Iraq is a very promising laboratory today for the future probably of the Arab world. This process is difficult, it is bumpy, it is maybe bloody sometimes, but I think that the future of this debate in Iraq will be a defining moment for the future of this region.
Let's continue with you. Chatham has covered Iraq for many years and produced some excellent studies and books, and also in Syria. Do you think that the problem of Iraq and Syria are greater than the rise of ISIS?
Thank you for the question. My media training has taught me to sidestep the first question and move straight on to my kind of key messaging. So I'm going to bring that into bearing at the moment, but I will answer your question throughout. First, I'd just like to echo Joseph's thanks to our host for convening this wonderful meeting. And personally, it's very nice to be here and also to see so many students. It's great to have a broad audience. It's a shame that the students can't move down a little bit, sort of lean in, as Sheryl Sandberg said, and come to the front. It would be very nice to sort of hear your questions and feel that. Before coming here, I spent 6 hours at Queen Alia International Airport, and I sort of jotted down my notes for what I was going to say. But of course, as we've gone through the 2 days, all those points have sort of been ticked off as we've gone along. So I've sort of jotted a few points down that I've heard throughout the past 2 days. I'd just like to reflect on those a little bit and then move on. One of those was Angus McKee this morning. He said, do not overestimate how much time diplomats or policymakers have to think. And I think that's a very pertinent case. Having served in the UK government, I know that there are natural constraints on capacity and priority. So occasions such as these are very, very important to creating that space and creating that time. And of course, that's the role that think tanks are here to perform. Then Brett McKirk said that the region is undergoing a major transformational change. Whilst most of the past 2 days has been focusing on Iraq and ISIS, naturally, there are two sort of trends that I'd like to touch upon. And one is we shouldn't forget that sort of the Arab Spring and what that gave rise to across the region. And number two, looking at the impact that the Syria conflict is having on the immediate neighbors. I'll come to that point in a moment. And the third point, which I thought was very pertinent today, Deb Amos said that when she was making a reflection on discussions around Sykes-Picot and whether the borders were going to remain, the borders haven't moved, but people have moved. I think that is, for me, that's the key takeaway from the past few days, and I'll tell you why in a few moments. So at Chatham House, we have a 3-year project where we're looking at is the impact, the long-term impact the Syria conflict is having on the immediate neighbors. We looked at we previewed some of the think tanks and some of the areas that they were focusing on. And we thought that, of course, most think tanks and most policymakers have to deal with the here and now. That's something that has to be addressed. But we thought at Chatham House we would sort of take a little bit of a back step and think about the long-term implications as to what's happening. We've got that luxury of time. We've left the government, moved into a think tank, so I can use that. So we've been thinking about long-term impact on the economies, on security for the neighboring states, on identity, on political economy, and demography. If one thinks about the movement of people, we've heard a lot today about refugees, we've heard about IDPs, and again, it's about addressing their immediate needs. But we work on the assumption that the Syria conflict is not going to end tomorrow, likely run 5, 10 years, who knows. Even if it ended tomorrow, that volume, that high number of refugees that we've been hearing about, they're not going to move back the next day. Jordan, Lebanon, yourselves are going to have these populations for a long time to come. So part of our project is very much to sort of think over the long term, what does that actually mean? And I'll just use Jordan as a case study, and I know we have a Jordanian colleague here with us. My colleagues and I spent a few days in Erbil, in northern Jordan, trying to assess a little bit the impact that the refugee population had placed on the local government. The local government has very few resources to provide for the infrastructure. We've heard very similar cases today. Can't provide basic, we heard about garbage collection today. That's a major issue. Wastewater management, massive issues. Local governments are affected somehow much more so than the central governments. And this has given us pause for thought. If one thinks about the point that Deb Amos said, and that's about borders, whether they remain there or not is irrelevant. It's about the movement of people and the displacement of those peoples and how that affects and how that feeds into the political economy. When I use that case study of Jordan, I think, well, you've now got this large population situated up in the north, going to be there probably for 10 years. Figures vary, but if children are being born now, in 10 years' time, that population is going to be much larger. It's going to require education. It's going to require jobs. That demographic growth is going to place enormous pressures on the central government. And this is where I think a key theme that's come out again over the past few days, and that's, I would say, decentralization. Decentralization is a key theme throughout the region. This is something that policy planners, those who are thinking of the long term, have the luxury of that, have to take that into account. What does that mean for central governments? What does that mean for the central Jordanian government? There's a natural inclination for governments all over the world to want to cling on to power and pull that in. And that's why I just factor in the Arab Spring. We've seen which way the Arab Spring has gone. But the factors that were behind that, the factors that drove that Arab Spring, haven't gone away. Those issues are still very much there, embedded within the societies. And as we see some regional governments beginning to close down space for young people in particular, for the underemployed, unemployed, we're moving towards possibly a clampdown for a period, maybe a clash later, 5 or 10 years' time. I think this shift, this demographic, economic shift across the region is going to pose a significant challenge to the authorities, central governments. And I think this idea of looking at decentralization and seeing how that process can be managed with a long-term perspective is the way forward.
Thank you very much. That's very, very interesting. Azam, you have been organizing this forum.
Actually, it's Barham, but that's okay.
No, Barham was the
We're the soldiers.
Barham was the director. You were the organizer. What differences, I want to ask you, what are the differences between these three forums? You attended, you participated. The first one was a challenge. were nervous, all of us. The second one was more settled. And here we have most distinguished audience here with us. And it has been established.
Yep.
Now it is an obligation on all of us to keep it
A
going.
proud one. Personally, I am proud to have been given the chance to be part of this incredible institute. And Barham, thank you for thinking of me in 2007 as somebody who can help bring your vision about. But before we start, I want to recognize the unidentified soldiers, the staff, the organizers, the security people, the volunteers that made it all possible. Guys, I'm proud. It's a privilege being part of this institute. It's all your work, though. This is all for you. And so, yes, we're getting better. There's a lot of things that we can do even better. But hey, that's the challenge. We learn from our mistakes. And if you have anything you want to tell us, please. When you criticize us, that means you love us enough to want us to do better. With that said, let me tell you a common theme to the last three. We always talk about what divides us. We always talk about what divides us. And this year, as you said, we're back to what unified us before 2003 was our hatred of Saddam. And that was the most important thing. And all of a sudden, we have a common enemy again. And all of a sudden, we're unified. We're talking about ISIL and ISIS and whatever, and how to defeat it. And then, yeah, I heard some platitudes about, reconciliation. Let's see what that's going to happen. I'm sorry, Barham, but if anything, I'm controversial. So, And I wish us hope. I wish us all luck that we actually are going to come up with actual reconciliation and actual plan moving forward. But one thing that struck me as over the past few days as I think about ISIL, Daesh and us have a common goal. We want a borderless Middle East. They wanted the Khalifa. We wanted the democracy. And another thing that I have not heard be spoken here in honesty. I'm from the south of Iraq. And over the past 4 or 5 years, I've heard more and more voices in southern Iraq saying, let the Kurds go. Why are they using our oil to build their independence? We know they're going to be wanting independence, and it's becoming louder and louder and louder. It's being fed, and I don't believe in conspiracy. It's just, it's happening. And I keep on telling my Arab colleagues, guys, you cannot drink that oil. Think about it. Southern Iraq is a sedimentary plain. What does sedimentary plain mean? It means soil transported from some place to someplace else with water and got sedimented. Look at the map. I've said this before. Southern Iraq is the gift of the mountains of Kurdistan. And that leads me to the next step. We are preceded by environment. We are guests on this ecology. If we do not treat it right, we're going to die of thirst. We're going to die of hunger. We have a common interest. We have a unifying thread. And that is the eternal Tigris and Euphrates that threads southern Iraq with Kurdistan. We are all, if we are what we eat, we're all Kurds. Think about it. It takes a while for it to sink, but we are all from the same minerals. Now, what do I mean by the common thread between us and ISIL? I really think that what you mentioned about decentralization, it's in the Constitution. We have the road plan, we just have not executed it. There will have to be, regardless of the rulers, regardless of the leaders, regardless of their need to grab on power, if they want to stay, and if there is true democracy, they're going to have to evolve power. You're going to have to leave it to the communities. You're going to have to leave it to Basra and not make the decision in Baghdad. You have to make it, okay, so I see the 1 minute. I'm going to apply by the rules. Hama Haj Mahmoud is not here. He inspired me. he said, Iraq must change or die. And that is an evolutionary ecology. It's a Darwin process. And you know what? We have to devolve or die. We have to decentralize and let the people practice democracy the way we do it in the United States. Local governance, moving on, and then we choose the leaders. And the leaders will have to be accountable to us at the local level. Right now, if I go to somebody in Chibaish and ask him who's the representative in the parliament, he or she does not know. There's 11 people. And their loyalty is to the party leaders, not to the people. Anyway, I'll stop here, but I'll say that the tools are there for the future to happen and for us to live together. I am too old. I got maybe 25 years, but this is your institution. You, the students of the AUIS, you are the future. And we messed it up, okay, but you know, we in the Middle East, we are busy talking and arguing about something that happened 1,400 years ago as if it makes a difference. But we in the United States, and I can wear both hats, are busy dreaming about the future and making it. What you are a mixture of the two cultures. You understand the 1,400 years history, but you have been taught to dream, and it's your task to take it over and make it happen. The tools are here. Take care of nature, she'll take care of you.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Rand, actually. I heard from one of the panelists in the previous session that the Iraqi are not talking to each other, talking past each other. From what you heard in the last couple of days, do you agree with that, or in terms of dialogue, in terms of interaction?
Let me first, next question, but let me first join everybody here in thanking Dr. Saleh, thanking Christine van der Toon, thanking Zaina Najjar, the hundreds of the board members of the university for hosting us. It has been true, and the hundreds of volunteers. There are too many sleepless nights that have gone to make this happen and work. So thank you very much. I feel very privileged to have been part of this forum. I wanted to inject one idea and then I will answer. Is that okay? I will answer your question. And the one idea is something that's personal. And the personal is, you said let's be personal. And I'm going to be very personal with this. It's something that I care a lot about. And I will tell you eventually why it is personal. And this is about the character of the Fertile Crescent. The character of our region. It has been gradually changing. And I'm talking about that demographic character, the ideological character. It has been, since, and the turning point for me is the Lebanese Civil War, with the leaving of lots of Christian families from Lebanon into and settle abroad. We are seeing it. We saw it in Iran with a lot of the minority groups. We are seeing it in Syria today, and especially with minority groups. Once they leave and settle somewhere else, it's very hard for them to come back to where they were. And as a result, who we are as a region and who we are as a people is irreversibly changing. And the trend is not in the positive direction. There is this beautiful book titled The Levant, and it's a history book, and it talks about key cities in the old Levant, which according to the author, have all but one disappeared. And the only one that is remaining is Beirut. I have to make a plug in here for Beirut. And by Levantine city, the character of the Levantine city is a space where you had interaction between different groups, you had tolerance for different ideas. And those spaces where taboo subjects can be discussed in public, taboo art can be displayed in public, are getting smaller and smaller in number. They are shrinking in our region. And that is that is not good for us as part of this region, but it's not good for the world. I mean, humanity is suffering as a result. And I'm getting to the personal. It's personal because I'm a Lebanese American Muslim married to a Lebanese American Christian. And for me, this is, we live diversity, we live the union. And I wish there are more such unions, in Lebanon because of that. Coming back to your question about talking to each other and talking with each other, I think there is definitely a problem. After 2 days, look, I don't think it's as dire as I thought it was before coming here. I think there are opportunities to create spaces for dialogue. I think there is now political will, especially in the office of the Prime Minister, that, in my opinion, did not exist with the previous Prime Minister, and I'm being very open about it. There is a crisis, and crises always create opportunities, and so this is an opportunity for the Iraqis to get into serious dialogue about a social contract, a new political contract, a new social contract between these different components of the society. And this problem is not unique to Iraq, but I hope that Iraq can set an example for the rest of the region. I think with the Arab Spring, it is now in intensive care, it's not dead, that all these social contracts have been upended. If there is one common friend to the Arab uprising, is the upending of the social contract and political contract in each of these countries. And the way you negotiate a social contract is through new constitutions like the Tunisian did, but also through national reconciliation. That's one of the objectives of national reconciliation, is for people, components in a society to come and decide what are the new rules of the game by which they are going to live in the future. And Iraq can set an example. By the way, and this is a fact, there has not been one successful national reconciliation process in the Arab region, not one. In Lebanon, after the end of the civil war, there was this hope of doing one such process. It was aborted. In Algeria, after their civil war, there was an attempt. It was aborted. In Morocco, with the new king, they tried something. It was aborted. And my hope in 2006, 2007, 2008 was that Iraq was going to be the first example of a successful Arab national reconciliation process. And that's a problem. We don't have such a successful model. And so when you go to Lebanon today to say, okay, let's talk about national reconciliation, when you go to Egypt, when you go to Libya, when you go to Yemen, all of us are in a way in a similar boat of needing to renegotiate this political contract, social contract. And Iraq really stands to be the trendsetter. If this opportunity today is seized and acted upon by all the components of the Iraqi society and politics.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I will conclude by drawing my own conclusion. I hope after my work and labor for you, I'll have some time to speak out. Really.
I paid for the microphone, as Reagan said.
I think this is the final session, so thank you for all the hard work instrumental in this forum. Of course, for Arham, for Azam, the university, and everybody who have contributed. The title of this forum was The Fertile Crescent in Turmoil. And this took us back to the Sykes agreement. Mark Sykes, Francis. George, sorry?
George.
Yeah. And it was exposed, the agreement, by the Bolsheviks. Correct me if I'm not wrong. If I'm wrong. And they have formed a map, draw lines in the sand to have sphere of influence. We should have been a French part according to that agreement, actually.
Lucky you.
Okay. Anyway, but looking back at the history, everybody is against Sykes-Picot. and the Arab nationalists, we hear. No, I'm not referring to you as representatives.
I'm not an Arab
Yeah.
nationalist. I'm proud from
Yeah.
Egypt. I'm definitely proud of that. But I'm not a nationalist, Arab nationalist, because that has
I didn't name you Islamic, so please don't interrupt me. I'm not guessing.
Can we all get along?
Okay? But every country in the region have been opposed to that agreement. And the Arab nationalists, they believe that this agreement has divided their nation, which was unified before, but then it was drawn into different states. But as I think Cameron Paradari rightly mentioned, they are opposed to Sykes-Picot, but they adore the borders they have drawn, or the entities that it has created. The Ottoman, or the new Ottomans are opposed to the agreement. The Kurds are opposed to the agreement because they believe they have divided Kurdistan unjustly. Now, ISIS is also against that agreement because it's abolishing all these borders. So, this is the reality. Now, I'm not justifying whether this agreement was right or wrong, but I believe changing border is difficult, historical. I think many people here, many conflicts in the world, that the most difficult thing are changing the borders. It means that they cannot be changed, definitely, but through consensus. You've seen Czechoslovakia, the border was changed but through a contract, through agreement. But by force, I think that is the problem, and to change this reality. I believe that there are many challenges in the Levant, and there are opportunities, but these opportunities really need good leadership. And this leadership has to be democratic. I mean, democracy needs democracy. And we should strive really to get to that stage. And also there are more common factors that combine these countries together to benefit from each other, resources to cooperate, but we are not there. So we also cover that area from the new realities. From regional perspective, we hear from many distinguished panelists from international. Then we went to energy policy and the financial crisis that Iraq is facing, or the Kurdistan regional government is facing yesterday. So the debate we had was very open, very transparent. But I have to clarify a couple of things here, because there were some statements which were not accurate. First, this agreement, the KRG Baghdad agreement, was a very, very important, I would say, historical agreement, a building block, really, for the budget which the Iraqi government approved. And both sides, actually, there were internal dynamics, not external, not the United States wanted us, not the United Nations wanted us. Actually, both sides felt there is a mutual need to reach that deal. Baghdad wanted that this government, this new government, which we celebrated last Tuesday to pass 6 months in office, and still we are safe. They needed a budget, and that budget would not have been constructed without the inclusion of the 550 barrels from Kurdistan, from Turkey. The KRG is in a financial crisis. They need the cash in order to pay the commitment. So that was the basis for that agreement. And it is holding, and Baghdad is committed really to fulfill its commitment. Also, the KRG is also committed. Baghdad is not paying Daesh the salary, as my good friend Gargahama mentioned. Actually, the process is we had this debate in Baghdad. These are government employees, and still there are services in these areas, from health, education, teachers. These are only the salaries, and there has to be checks and balances that it should not go directly to Mosul or to Tikrit. There are representative council or governor from both Mosul and Tikrit that they receive these payments and release it to those people. Mostly are not in ISIS, but some goes to controlled areas under ISIS. And this is, I have to clarify that. So the transfer will happen from Mosul to Kirkuk, not to Mosul. In fact, ISIS have taken all the money from the banks from Mosul, Anbar, and Tikrit, and there were over $600 million and trillions of Iraqi dinars from these banks. And this is a fact. The other issue we discussed in detail this morning and yesterday was how to fight ISIS. And last night we all heard the most wonderful speech and recollection from General David Petraeus at a dinner hosted by Guy Barham. I personally enjoyed every word he said to him. It was a historical speech about what went wrong in Iraq, what was right, and what was wrong. There are many things that have gone right, and despite the difficulties. Again, I would refer to the very emotional speech Dr. Hammer made about all these Iraqi leaders that they have been killed in the history of Iraq. But none of them have been killed since 2003.
Well, one.
None of them have been killed since 2003, since the democratic change. All those people who doesn't like that, it's their free to entitle to their opinion. But there has been changes. We have the Constitution that is the framework that we can go back to it. There has been changes, there has been an improvement in the living standard of the people, but we wanted Rwanda to be that example after the Arab Spring. And really everything the Arab masses called for, we've achieved it. But again, it was bad governance, it was poor governance that squandered all these values and goals. Otherwise, they were calling for empowerment, they were calling for representation, they were calling for transparency, they were calling their budget should people know how they are allocated, how it should be spent. They needed for the women to participate. These were the main demand of the Arab masses. And I had asked a question whether the Arab Spring would have been possible without removing Saddam. And that was another question. I can't go on this, but really I don't want to take much of your time. A few comments. Georgie mentioned the human cost of the conflict with ISIS. And Neil also mentioned the demographic changes for all these masses of refugees. In Iraq, 5 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. The demography of Kurdistan will change if these people will not go back to their homes. The governor of the whole is here. He knows how the demographic imbalances according to the populations of the world. So ISIS not only created a security problem, It created huge economic, social, it attacked the fabric of the society. Not many people spoke about the atrocities in this forum. The Christians, women, the Yazidis, the Shabak have been subjected to. This monster of ISIS, I hear many people say that these people are tool of some powers, and everybody has its own interpretation. United States, Israel, Iran, Syria, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. But really ISIS is an ideology of hatred. That anything Islam or humanity stand for, they wanted to establish a khilaf of hatred. So that's why the whole world is with us, but it is our fight. We agree with all the interventions that many presenters made, but especially General Petraeus, that the war against ISIS is winnable. Mosul can be liberated, Tikrit can be liberated. It's doable. And with this mighty force, with this mighty international force, and support that we have, which we are the envy of many people. That's why it didn't happen elsewhere. That's why we are proud that the investment we made in our relations with our friends have paid off. But without finding the political peace to fix that, without ensuring that the security forces, all the security forces, are legitimate in the eyes of the population, the gains can be reversed. And this is the big challenge facing us and facing the new government. My last comment, Dr. Barham, before I give you the floor to have your concluding remarks. I wanted very much really in this forum to have political representatives from Turkey and from Iran. It's very important. I think more effort should be exerted next time in terms of planning and securing some days. I tried to have them, but it was too late, at least to have this comprehensive perspective on the situation. And also I'd really like to see next year panel to reduce the number of the speakers in each panel and to give more time for Q&A, for more interaction. And
I'll call you next year when we need to pressure.
No. And last thing, really, I want to say that this forum has been a success, and I'm also proud to be part of it.
Yes.
And to thank each and every one of you for being so cooperative and for all the hospitality Gag Farouk has offered us, and all the sponsors. Nobody mentioned the sponsor of this forum. We have a long list of them. I want to thank all of them for their help and support. Thank you very much.
Has been a momentous choice. Truly, the diversity of opinions represented on this stage was staggering. I hope it is a statement about it is possible to talk to each other, to have a dialogue, disagree, and try to solve our problems through dialogue and exchange of views. This is the mission of Sulaimani Forum. This is the set of government to faraway lands, discussing our problems, and we can do it together. This is the epicenter of change. And our people, the help of our friends, we can gather together. I hope next year we will come. The comes in May, this will looking better. In that context, I genuinely want to thank an important icon for you as foreign minister, very cooperative, very helpful. And now as finance minister, hopefully when oil prices will go up, this was like a roller coaster. It happened in the midst of this battle, this war with ISIS. Many outsiders invited here were skeptical that they were coming to a war zone. And 2 days before the event, flights from the Gulf were suspended from Dubai as well as Doha. And many of our Arab participants, as a matter of fact, were coming through that crowd, and we could not reroute them. Few have been rerouted, thanks to our wonderful Zaina, but many also stayed away. We have invited many from the Arab world, maybe reflecting on Walida's point, which is a very good point and well taken. But our colleagues in the Arab world need to understand, they need to be engaged. This is where the change is happening, and they just cannot wish these problems away. They have a stake in this process of change. They need to be involved, and we are more than open and welcoming of their views and their engagement with us. We had senior representatives from Turkey, the deputy foreign minister. We were supposed to have a senior representative from the Iranian foreign ministry, but somehow the flight did not work out. But next year, inshallah, we are pleased and genuinely honored to have had so many distinguished guests from the United States, from across the region, from Europe, officials as well as experts and friends of this part of the world who are interested in change. And I really appreciate all the trouble that he went through in order to get to here. Sulaimani is not the easiest of places to get into, but somehow many of you made the effort and have come, and I appreciate it very much indeed. This forum would not have been possible without the active work of our leadership at this university, Dr. Esther Molenex, our acting president, and our board of trustees who have been committed in making this mission work. This particular event would not have been possible without the work of so many people in the KRG, in the federal government of Iraq, as a matter of fact, who have been helpful in trying to facilitate it. The protocol office of the Prime Minister's office in Erbil, who have been extremely helpful and generous, and I thank you for your help making all the logistics and working through this thing. The faculty and staff of the university who have been with us, and the staff volunteers who have worked, but also our IRIS team, Christian Turan, Zainab Najjar, our communication department, Sarah Jalan, Hannah, Mer, and the IT department. All of these people have really come together to make it possible. The security department of Sulaimani and particularly the ones in Sulaimani who have been working over the last 3 days making sure that security is well taken care of. I appreciate what they have done. And the staff volunteers, as I said, but I really want to thank our student volunteers. They are the ones who motivate us. The students of this university,